And everybody just say something.
Hello, yo. West Side.
Hey, yo.
We good, Darren?
Okay, we're good to go.
So are you starting or me?
Over to you, Maestro.
Good evening and welcome to CanHammer, your stop for Warhammer 40k from the Great White North. Today's show is episode 145, right,
No,
Darren?
154.
154. Oh,
You've been away since 145.
Have I been? Yeah. So, I guess I'm back. For those of you that don't know, I had a child and I took a hiatus for about 4 to 5 weeks, and I'm still exhausted, so I'm going to say some pretty silly things. But anyway, this is their basically weekly live broadcasted web show all about Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000. I guess Age of Sigmar and 40,000. As usual, I'm your host, Chris, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Darren.
And we have a special guest joining us all the way from the Great White North, Mr.
Peter Colosimo, the Falcon. Caca!
Or caca!
So, Peter, before we even talk anything about you, how did you get that nickname?
Well, it's actually really friggin' stupid. I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, I got into an argument over beers that you shouldn't be able to give yourself your own nickname, and I changed my nickname on Facebook multiple times to the point where it wouldn't let me change it ever again. So my Facebook name has been Peter Falcon Colosimo for that long, and it's just become a thing now. Everyone calls me the Falcon. That has met me since, and I often get asked if it's actually part of my real name, which those people are ridiculous, but is what it is. My parents aren't that awesome.
I was gonna say my kid was pretty close to getting an awesome name, but I chickened out last minute.
Oh yeah.
So the new baby's name is Lionel, and I wanted to make his middle name Johnson, so it was Lionel Johnson.
Oh man.
And I had pick. I'm gonna tell you, I had pick a middle name. And I got cold feet. I didn't do
Backed out?
Yeah, I did.
Man.
That's not an unreasonable name either.
No. I have 3 kids, and for all 3, I tried real hard to have them named Osimo. So it'd be Osimo Colosimo. My wife was having none of it. I'd whisper it in her ear 3 a.m. when she was sleeping. No go. No go.
Osimo Colosimo.
That would be freaking wicked. That is what it is, though.
That is a wicked last name, though. That's legit.
Yeah.
And I need to apologize for not getting you on this show earlier, considering basically Canada has the 2 most famous stats peoples in wargaming right now, yourself and LLV, Damien, who's out in Alberta. So between us Canadians, we got all this number stuff cornered. And,
we've got the market for now.
The Americans would be lost without us, quite clearly. So
I think it's funny that Darren says us Canadians got the stats when he can't even do basic addition.
Oh, I suck at math. Yeah. This whole cast is just going to go straight over the head, and I'm going to ask the most silly questions. But hey, there you go.
Hey, that's perfectly fine. That's generally what I get, and I'm okay with it. I prefer the easier questions than the hard ones.
Don't we all? So anyway, since it's your first time on the cast, Peter, we like to kind of do a quick bio so that people can understand your street cred, where you're coming from, how you got into the hobby. So I want to start off with, what do you play currently?
Currently, I play Adeptus Custodes. They're my
my God, I hate you all.
Yes.
Listen. I guess you're going to ask me about the history, but when I first got into Warhammer 40k, it was Adeptus Custodes that I wanted to play so bad, and this was a decade ago. And when I asked my buddy, when he was showing me all the stuff, he's like, "They don't exist, man. That's just lore." I was so mad, and so when they came out, just friggin' the best. I bought everything. I bought all the Forge World models. I bought every Talons of the Emperor kit I could. I was just balls deep in.
Good man.
I also have a Death Watch army that I'm kind of building up now just to give me something else to do. And I have a large Blood Angels army that is sitting collecting dust on a shelf.
So you like giant men in power armor, basically?
Yeah, I played Tau for 6th edition and 7th, and I didn't want people to hate me anymore, so I switched.
Be that kind
Plus,
of guy.
I like close combat, so that also helps. And that wasn't happening with Tau.
No, that's funny.
Nice.
So yeah, so why don't you go in through your gaming history?
Well, yeah, so I started playing Warhammer probably about 11, 12 years ago now, I want to say. It was Warhammer Fantasy was what I first got into. I was playing board games with a buddy over drinks, and a couple extra guys showed up I'd never met before. One of them managed the local game store for the city of Moncton in New Brunswick. And he had, while we were playing, he was like, "Man, you seem to have an eye for strategy. Have you heard of Warhammer?" And he was selling it hard. So I went over to his place one night. We had a couple drinks, played some fantasy, some 40K. Really got into the fantasy side. Back then it was like 6th moving into 7th, I want to say, edition. So I bought a big Lizardman army off a dude. Played the shit out of Warhammer Fantasy straight up until the end times.
Oh yeah.
And I kind of dabbled into 40K, but I had a small Space Wolves army, and then 6th edition 40K came out. I got into Tau, but before the Tau Codex came out, and it became stupid broken. But really enjoyed myself there, and yeah, that's really about it. After that, I've just been playing ever since. We didn't really have an organizer back home at the time, back on the East Coast. So I kind of did all the TOing for our city, and yeah, the end, I guess. And then now I'm in northern Alberta with a tiny community. We've got about 10 or 12 guys that play up here.
That's pretty good. Yeah, man, that's good.
Trust me, I was shocked when I found out. I kind of Facebooked the area, and I was like, oh, there's a gaming community.
It takes one person, man, to start it all off.
Exactly. And so I play with these guys, once every few weeks, whenever I can. We sit down. I'm the competitive guy, unfortunately. Like, most of them are pretty casual, but I get my rocks off when I can.
That's pretty sweet.
That's nice. So, what, like, you guys both play Custodes. Is that why do you guys like that? Is it just because low model count, cool factor? Like, I don't know. Because it just seems like everybody plays Custodes these days.
Well, as I said on the last podcast with Shane, I picked it up because that book, Emperor of Mankind, was just amazing. Where it tells you the battle underneath the palace.
Yeah.
And the whole lore that these guys are just super marines that don't even need squads. It's just one dude. And I was like, that's fucking awesome. And then so when they came out, I was like, oh, that's fucking awesome. Although they didn't quite replicate that kind of one dude thing in how the army works, which would be sweet.
Yeah, of course not.
Yeah. It would also
take this 2,000-point model. It's called the Titan.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, like, you still have to take units of them, right? So as opposed to working out some way or some rule where you could just take individual models as units, that would be sick. But that is really the lore that got me into Custodes. And then the models were just awesome, too, so...
Yeah, it's the same here with the lore, but it started, like I said, probably about a decade ago when I started getting to 40K. Somebody said, hey, look up the lore for the factions, figure out which one you like the most, and go from there. And as I was reading, I started reading about these Adeptus Custodes dudes that looked like, because the old art for them, they were basically Spartans, right? They didn't even wear armor. It was just like these 10-foot tall dudes with helmets on. That was it. And I was like, these guys look awesome. So Mary Sue, I'm 100% in. Found out they didn't have an army, and was pretty disappointed. When the 30K Horus Heresy version came out, I had actually started collecting them just because they looked cool. Then that Talons of the Emperor box set came out, bought that up, read Emperor of Mankind, just like Darren, and I was like, this is the greatest thing that ever happened. Like, they're just so badass. And I'm a real big fan of Hero Hammer. I even liked it when I played Lizardman. I did a lot of Skink Horde and Warhammer Fantasy Battle, but it was always like my Saurus Cowboys that I loved the most. Just guys that were almost unkillable, running in, doing as much damage as possible. So.
Oh, those old bloods were nasty.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we're going to hand it over to Darren to pay the bills and keep the lights on.
Yeah, so M. Popa just popped into the chat. How are you doing, M. Popa? He won the Skaven Battle Tome. Gene Stealer Battle Tome. I can't remember. I gave it away a lot.
Congratulations, man. Yeah.
But welcome. So, we want to thank Dan at Sequence Comics, Dylan at Multizone, and David Tistamines, Martin over at Dyson Decks, and Hoyt up at Thunder Games and Gifts for being our big sponsors. I want to thank all our patrons, both past, present, and future, for supporting us. And just wanted to let people know that we have I'll be putting up on our Facebook a discount code for Thunder Games and Gifts, courtesy of Hoyt, for the month of March. He's basically given us a discount code for every month this year on different merchandise, so you can sort of wait for the month that kind of fits what you want to buy. And they're all, we'll just say, generous discounts. So do check them out. We'll put them up on our Facebook page so people can make good use of those. So thank you very much, Hoyt. And yeah, that's it.
Right on. So we brought Peter on. For those of you that don't know or maybe don't listen to Chapter Tactics or other shows, Peter is a stats god, dare I say?
Whoa.
That's a soft term, I would say.
I went too low there. I was trying to be like
Emperor of Stats.
Emperor of Stats.
Guys, now there's going to be expectations.
Oh, there always is. So Peter runs through a lot of 40K stats, and he compiles a lot of data, does a lot of graphs and charts. We're going to run through some interesting stats. So maybe if you have any questions for the end of the show or anything you want us to ask, stat related or 40K related, please post it in the chat as we go, and we'll engage you if we can accommodate it. Darren's monitoring that.
Yep.
So why don't you give us a quick rundown on how you compile the stats, where you get the data, and kind of just the background for those people that maybe haven't heard you before.
Sure. So the background on it was, well, about a year ago now, I was listening to an episode of Chapter Tactics, and Val Heffelfinger, another Canadian, was going over the previous year's like very generic stats that Best Coast Pairings had given him. And I thought it was so interesting that as they were talking, that nobody was actually doing this stuff. Like that they only had this very like brief overview of how things had been. And so I kind of started thinking about it. And I had a stats background. I did a lot of project management work, and I did a lot of like forecasting and data trending prior to my current career. So I think it was BAO, I want to say. When that came around, I sent an email to Pablo from Frontline Gaming to say, hey guys, I don't think, do you guys have anybody that runs stats for this stuff? Because I'm quite sure I could do it for the tournament. And he said, no, but if you want to give it a go ahead. So I built a couple databases. I started copying down lists from the Best Coast Pairings app, and went from there. I was tracking units. At the time, units, faction points, like how many points you spent for each detachment, win rates, etc. And I did it for that one tournament and sent the data over to the FLG guys. They really liked it. And a lot of other people did too. They were asking me if I'd keep it up. So I did. I created a website, built two much more in-depth databases. And every week I pop into Best Coast Pairings, Down Under Pairings for the Australians, and Tourney Keeper, and collect all of the list data from every major tournament. So anything that's considered like an ITC GT or major, 28 person and above, 5 rounds or above. I collect all of the information I can from them and post them in these databases and upload it up to my website so that people can.
Your website?
40kstats.com, 40kstats.com. Some people liken it to dickpills.com, but you like the link is dead. It won't go there anymore. It gets weird.
Dick pills. Okay, cool.
That email again is 40kstats.com.
So
that's what I was thinking the whole time.
You literally get all your numbers off of BCP, or they give you like a printout, or like how?
It's all manual.
Oh,
it's all manual.
That's hard.
Yes. Yeah. So for the FLG majors, so BAO, SoCal, and LVO, I get an Excel sheet, basically like a Java download of everything, which makes my life way easier because then it's mostly copy paste and then just change formatting. But for anything else, because I don't work for BCP or anything like that, I'd have to ask each individual TO first, hey, am I allowed to have your data, blah, blah, blah. So rather than do that, and rather than put BCP through the trouble of making all these requests, I just manually take it down. I happen to be in in a job where I'm really busy for maybe 3 hours of my day, and then I have a good 5 or 6 hours where I can kind of just do what I want. And so generally, like, I do it all from there. I'll sit in my little airport tower and work on Excel spreadsheets for a shift.
Wow.
The down under pairings guys are a lot better for it, just because they own the data, and I've become pretty good friends with Josh and Adam from Australia, so I can actually get for pretty much all of their tournaments. They'll send me everything if I really want it, and in the format I normally inputted it anyway. So.
Okay, well, when we do CanHammer Team and Capital City, let us know how we can make this job easier for you.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'll definitely do that. That's actually
yeah.
something I'm about to start. I'm going to start tracking team tournaments, which I hadn't been doing previously. And I'm going to try to figure out the best way to calculate that data for people, because I think it's a different way to play Warhammer, and you can't just take like random win percentages, right? Because of the way the way it's played out.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, you'd have to definitely factor in, and you don't know. That's the one thing with ETC is you don't know the role of each faction. Like somebody could be taking a faction like Orcs or maybe Sisters of Battle instead of and use them in a certain way that
exactly
isn't really appropriate for like singles analysis.
Yeah, and so I'm kind of working on that. A really awesome guy from the UK, Tom Adriani, sent me all of the Belgian nationals, which happened a couple weeks ago. He sent me all of the data, and so I'm kind of scanning through it to figure out what's the best way to take that down in a reasonable manner. Because
he's not in the UK, right? He's in Belgium.
I think Tom.
Does he live in the UK? I thought he lived in Belgium. He's Belgian captain.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Team.
He is. Yeah, no, sorry.
He might be listening.
Sorry, Tom.
So that's why I was like, he might be listening.
Yeah, Tom's awesome. He got me in contact with the guys that run Tourney Keeper, like their little Euro BCP, and so I've gotten a lot of help from them, because a lot of the European tournaments, they don't put their data anywhere. Like they don't use BCP or Tourney Keeper or anything. And Tom's been really good for getting them to email me data. So I'll wake up some mornings and there'll just be like an email from like Innes Wilson in Scotland or some other like random from Germany with, hey, we had a 60-person tournament on the weekend. Here's all my stuff.
Yeah.
And it helps a lot.
Well, I've been told that BCP's good for team tournament, so I'm going to load it up for CanHammer Team. I don't know. We're not going to rely on it necessarily to do all our like mathing, but we will load it up and hopefully we can gather data from that. And of course, it helps when the lists are all formatted, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I almost prefer Tourney Keeper for team events personally, but we'll see.
Well, they've been doing it for forever, so they kind of have that one down pat, I'd say.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that about Europe kind of being like segmented, and I definitely noticed that when you tried, because like as an ETC player, I try to dig dirt up on other countries. You try to look at like where are the German players, like what tournament did they just go to, or what tournaments they play at, because they do quite well. Or Poland's another example, and it's really hard to find a lot of that data and the lists and who placed where. They're very segmented, so it's funny that you found that as well.
And it's been a really cool part about doing this. I guess you could call it a job now. Is just like the connections I've been making with people around the world and seeing all the different ways they handle their data. It's awesome.
Now I got to ask you. So we're going to look at the data in a bit. Is it mostly just kind of faction-based data, or do you have player-based data?
So I have the ability to do player-based data now. I haven't started because I want a lot more before I start looking at that. Because I only track majors and GTs, it kind of really shrinks the data pool for players, right? There's only like a core group, I would say, that attend like enough majors and GTs where I can give like strong confidence intervals, I would say, for like how a player is performing.
Yeah, because it would be cool. You'd be like, okay, here's LVO, and then we could literally bring up like NBA style stats. Well, Nick Nanavati's in the 5th round, and whenever he plays Orcs, he has this win rate against this player with this. Like, it would be cool to make it more personalized.
You need a lot of games for that.
Yeah.
No,
and funny enough, I did do that for LVO, but we didn't use it. So like I was given like a Google Drive for Jeff and Frankie when they were doing the the commentary, and so I was uploading all sorts of stats on the different factions they had, and even at the players, I was bringing up like, here's how they did in the ITC this year. Here's how they've performed against whatever. But a lot of it didn't get used because they were so focused on trying to keep the games going. Yeah. But it is something we're moving towards. So.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
So go ahead, Darren.
Yeah.
No, I'll let you take it. You take it. Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking because so Peter's got some sort of basic LVO breakdowns for us. We don't want to spend too much time talking about LVO. You guys covered that really well on Chapter Tactics. And then we have some special custody stats just for Chris.
Oh, come on, man. I don't need this. I want orc stats. Where's the orc stats, bro?
I can get you orc stats. That's a real... I can get you anything at this point. I have it all at the fingertips.
Whatever you want, Chris. Whatever you want.
I want proof that Ludas suck, but they're also really good, but that they really suck.
Well, we've seen a lot of non-Luda orc stuff recently.
Yeah, because Ludas are risky. They're they auto lose to... Once GSC dropped, the Luda orcs are dead.
This is what I'll say. 25-man Luda is a bad scene right now. They're not performing very well. 15, just one squad, single squad, is performing quite well. They're still like in the 54% win rate. We saw it at LVO. People that like LVO stats for orcs were pretty garbage, other than like a select few players. But once you dove deep, because for LVO I went like all the way. I collected individual unit stats and how they performed. Orc players that did not bring Ludas at all had about a 33% win rate, and there was probably about, I want to say off the top of my head without pulling up the numbers, something like 24 or 25 guys that didn't bring Ludas, and they really brought down the overall orc average. Orc players that brought a squad of 15 performed best. They had about a 55% win rate, which is pretty significant. And then guys that brought about 25, they sat about 50-50.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I could see that. The one thing I will say about orcs is historically orcs have always been seen, no matter how good that book is, even in 5th edition, the orc book was amazing. But the general consensus on orcs was that they're always lower tier, just because there's the sheer volume of fluff bunny players and converters that seem to be drawn to orcs. Yeah, and that's why like a lot of these stats, in my opinion, you can't look at like the overall LVO. I think you should only look at like maybe the top 25% if you really want to know how stuff's performing, because the bottom half of most tournaments are just fluff bunnies there to have fun, right?
And I've brought that up a few times with on the Chapter Tactics podcast, how orcs generally perform on average pretty poorly. There was a period from about, I want to say, November to January, or maybe December. Yeah, November to January, where orcs were on fire. They had a really high win rate regardless of the fluff bunnies. But it died out at LVO, back to what it had been. So orcs sit around a 48% win rate right now overall. But if you look at their T-WIP, their tournaments in winning position, which is kind of my stat that I use to really determine like how competitive an army is, and it's held very well up to now. They're still performing. They're still in the about sorry, trying to say the words properly here, but my mouth isn't working. They make up about 6% of all factions that get into a winning position, which, given the fact that they make up about 7% of the actual meta, is really solid. It's kind of what you want to see for a competitive faction, is to be in that balance. It's the same as Imperial Knights. They make up about 10%, and they're about 10% of the tournaments in winning position. The only ones that are really skewed are things like Inari, which they're 5%, but they make up 12% of armies that make it into like a top 2, top 3 tables.
Yeah, I agree. It also makes sense too that a lot of hyper-competitive Eldar players play Ynnari, but a lot of like normal Eldar players don't add in that Ynnari element.
Yep.
So that would skew it in my opinion. But I do like that. When you say I understand why the 15 Ludas work. It just gives you more points for another unit or two of boys. And one thing I do find is that the good orc armies tend to be 200 models, and very few war gamers in general are willing to hit that model kind of count.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm kind of attributing it to. And plus, hordes are very challenging to play because one mistake, you get wrapped, and then you're kind of in trouble. But
yeah, so that's the thing. And what was interesting this last weekend, because last weekend they had 9 GTs and majors, and Orcs top 5 of them, I want to say. Several of those armies that did very well didn't bring boys at all.
Yeah,
really?
Just Gretchen, yeah.
Yeah.
Gretchen are essentially boys that don't die. There's more of them, like you just take more.
There were 2 in particular. One at Dark Millennium in Scotland, he ran no boys. He ran 20 Mega Knobs instead. So it was like the standard orc list we've been seeing, that kind of Steve Pamprine one that won Renegade Open.
But sorry, what is that list? I've been like out of the loop for like a month.
Oh, okay. So it's like 2... It's Bad Moons and Evil Sons, and the Evil Sons detachment was like the 90 boys with a weird boy and a war boss and a big mech. And then there's a Bad Moons detachment with the big mech with the Dreadwog shock attack gun, another weird boy, and then generally you would have 30 to 60 Grots. And then there's another Bad Moons detachment or a mixed detachment that'll have commandos or something like that in it. So he got rid of the 90 boys. I think his name was Aiden Higgins, and just he brought 20 Mega Knobs instead. Basically replaced all his boys with Mega Knobs. So he had the 25 Ludas from the Bad Moons detachment so that you could mob up and murder. And he had this 20-man Mega Knob squad, and 90 Gretchen were what he ran. And he went 5-0-1. So a really good performance there. Ben Jurek, I don't know if he ran boys in his list. He went with Freebooter's list that was all over the place with like Gorkanaut, Morkanaut, and Wazbomb Blasta, and 2 Daka Jets. There have been some really interesting orc lists after LVO. People have been really playing with stuff to see if they can make orcs work in a different way.
Well, the Ludas was the thing that just instantly stood out to everybody. But clearly that book had way more depth than just a bunch of Ludas.
For sure.
So you're 100% right, Darren. I think the big thing with Ludas was people didn't it was like the shock factor is they worked really well, but if you play right against Ludas, you can really mess them up. And so like a lot of like until, you always saw the Ynnari players that would take a dark, a Drukhari faction, for Vect. It was very rare though. Like it wasn't a very common Ynnari build. You saw it here and there. But as soon as the Ludas hit the scene, everybody I know that played Ynnari added in a Vex guaranteed just to like, now I can nuke the orc list, right? That's kind of a good counter to Eldar. So that happened. Genestealer cults came out. They can shut down the orcs. And then people just learned, right? You shoot the big unit, and then you go first against it. You shoot the big unit, and then you just wipe out the little unit. Or you do enough damage to the big unit, and you do some damage to the little unit, and they can't combine anymore, and you kind of would just beat it. And it's like it's so many points to invest to make that unit work that I'm not surprised people are dropping it like at all. That's what. And
oftentimes it's overkill, right?
Exactly. Oftentimes it's overkill, and a lot of people. That's why when like the joke, a lot of people gave me, because I always say like, oh, Ludas are shit, and then I would take them in every tournament I went to, and I would do really well. And then Devin would always be like, Chris, you always say Ludas are shit, but yeah, you're like owning. And I'm saying it because of that, right? Like if you don't have the terrain or you don't get the position or in that right matchup, you go second, you lose them, and that's your army gone. So
yeah,
that's one.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I haven't lost the Ludas yet, so.
So yeah, you've seen a lot of turn away from Ludas or going down to the one squad. Steve Pamprine did it at LVO. He brought a brigade instead with just 15 Ludas as part of it. But then, maxed out a lot of other things. A lot of people bring in Death Coptas now. Orcs are in a really interesting place. I really think that there were a lot of people after LVO that said they were garbage just because they didn't make top 8. But I think that was what we in the Warhammer community really like to jump to assumptions so
yeah, people look. And one thing that people need to factor in is in order to make top 8 on an event that big, or even like top 16 at a Adepticon or any of those big events, you have to have 3 things. You have to have a top army build, you have to be a really good player, and you have to be practiced up on their missions. And people tend to always focus on the army, and they see they'll see 2 Ynnari at the top, but then they don't see the Ynnari at the bottom, right? From the guys that maybe don't know how to execute it. So you really need that all. And sometimes you just need the right matchups, right? You bring Ludo Orcs to LVO and you play a pure Drukhari once or twice, you're going to lose a lot of points.
Yeah, we'll look at like both Nick Nadavati and Steve Pamperini. They went 5-1. The same guy knocked them both out, and he was second place at the tournament, right? So, and he built a list that was especially designed to deal with the Castellan and deal with orcs. So,
yeah. All right. Well, let's get on to some of these stats. So, Peter, I've loaded up the one that's called Faction Representation LVO today.
Yep.
And I'll put it up on the stream here. This is pretty interesting. We can just go through this one quickly here.
Sure. So I didn't put a... Sorry.
I was just going to say, this is the one where you had all the factions that were at LVO and then lined up with all the factions played since LVO, right?
This is actually just everything. So what this is, and I should have created a legend, but I was lazy. So this... I
was trying to figure it out for the show. I was like, I don't know what these mean.
So yeah, the blue bars, that is primary faction representation. So, and the yellow bars are overall representation in lists. So this is everything from LVO to today. I've collected 4,000 games worth of data so far. 8,000 games technically, but 4,000 because two people have to play each other generally. It's about 1,200 lists, which is ridiculous, by the way. When I collected data from June through to January, it was the equivalent. It was about 4,000 lists worth of data, and I've 1 month in, and I'm already at 1,200. 1,600. So like a lot of games have been going down.
Yeah.
So this is what people are playing right now. There's not a lot of There's not been a lot of change, basically since the Orc Codex got released. So if you look at Astra Militarum. That big old yellow bars, 24.61% of lists in the last month have had some kind of Astra Militarum in them, 9% as primary. And you go over to Imperial Knights, that big old 21.86% of lists have had some kind of knight in it, and 10.33% are primary.
So that's the highest primary, actually, is knights at 10%. Yeah.
And that's kind of been it since Knights came out.
Yeah.
Basically, since June of last year, it's been back and forth between Knights and Guard for what's been the most popular. After that, you'll have Orcs and Tau sitting around 7%. And the Orcs have actually dropped after LVO. They were almost at 10. They were getting to the Imperial Knight level. They were so popular, and since LVO, there have been less and less people bringing the Orcs out. And Tau have always been in that 7% range. People have kind of just that's just where it's always been.
That's a surprise to me because Tau are really good right now.
They are, but they're spiky, at least in terms of what I see for win-loss ratios. I'm trying to think here. There have been a couple interesting changes of late. Inari have kept going up. They used to be only about 3% of the meta, and now they're sitting almost at 6%. I think that's going to. I'm told that'll be dying down soon. Deathwatch used to be about 1%, and now they are. I'm seeing a huge spike in Deathwatch play.
Oh, I believe that because they're a great anti-horde list, and there's a lot more hordes, and you're seeing a lot of people pull out their Deathwatch.
Yeah, and they had a tournament win in Australia last week, which was their first big tournament win, and they went undefeated at that Dark Millennium in Scotland as well. There was a guy who went 4-0-2 with them. So yeah, we're seeing a huge spike. It's actually causing their win rates to drop because we're getting a lot of lower end table people bringing them now as well, trying all sorts of wacky shit.
So you got Adeptus Titanicus 0.09. Is that one dude who bought
that? Was that one
LVO?
Dude at LVO? You got it.
Awesome.
Caused me to have to change all of my goddamn spreadsheets.
Should have just disqualified him.
Yeah, I almost just didn't include him. But
so I want to take a step back. What's the Deathwatch hot list like? Don't go into detail, but what's the approximate gist of it?
Usually the Deathwatch hot list is about 1,000 points of Deathwatch, and it'll be a Watchmaster, either a Captain or a Librarian with Jump Pack,
and then vets.
And then 3 squads of veterans that are fully mixed. Yeah. So 2 Terminators, a bike, a Vanguard vet, and then 6 guys with Storm Shield and Storm Bolter. That's the usual, and then things kind of vary from there. But that's the most competitive lists. That's what they're running.
Wow.
Yeah. It's pretty. I played it in Sudbury. I've got Deathwatch being painted up for me right now. It's pretty gross. Very toolboxy.
It's very effective, and like they're very good at dealing with hordes, and you can't tie them up, right? Because they can just teleport out or fall back and shoot, fall back and charge.
Yeah.
They do everything.
Yeah. Yeah, super cool. I actually have a list of Deathwatch and Custodes that you might be interested in, Peter. But.
I would be, because I've been trying to make that work. Like in BCP, I probably have about 8, or not BCP, Battlescribe. I've probably got about 8 templates for that list trying to make it work. So, yeah, and the thing about Deathwatch is that's only 1,000 points to your list. You can go anywhere from there and do pretty well.
All right, cool. Well, it would be interesting to see what happens to this chart, because I think that obviously Gene Stealers is going to shoot up. And
one other thing that shot up recently is AdMech.
Yes, AdMech's going to shoot up for sure.
Yeah, so they're 3.7% as a primary has kind of been the norm. This 7.5 as a secondary has been a big change. A lot of people taking that kind of minimum battalion as Graia to get the 4+ deny. And plus, it's the cheapest battalion you can get now for 5 CP.
Yep.
So.
Yep. I'm taking that.
And that's the thing, and it took a little bit, but with the guard battalion, kind of getting that nerf bat, was that 3 months ago?
Yeah.
There's less incentive to take them over the AdMech, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And plus, with AdMech doing so well at LVO and pulling up a couple tournament wins last week, you're seeing more and more. Those Cataphren destroyers are everywhere now, as well as the breachers.
Yep. Drills, termite drills.
Yep. Yeah, termite drills and dragoons. Like there's 2 like really big cult Mechanicus lists that are doing a lot of work. So. All
right. Okay. Let's move on from this one. Which one should we talk about next, Peter? Just pull it up here.
Let's do win rate real quick. Sure. I think we kind of touched on it to a degree. Like my feelings on it are essentially the same as Chris's, but it's across the board.
And that's a green chart, right?
Yeah, the green and blue.
Yeah. All right. Here it is coming up, people. All right. So this is a chart, win percentage as primary or whole.
Yeah. So the green is as a primary faction, what everybody's win rate's been in the last month over these like almost 4,000 games that I've calculated. And the blues are as a secondary.
Okay. So while we're going through this, Popa just wants to know how many of these will include G-Man. I don't know if it's possible to pull that up at some point, but how many pure ultra lists with G-Man?
Yeah, I can get that at least for LVO for him. That was something that I actually calculated for Pablo, because he's got quite the boner for Gulliman. Oh, he's all about it.
So do I right now, buddy. G-Man and Repulsors just make me so ready to go.
Yeah, well, Aaron Towler, he went almost all the way right with that list. So Gulliman, 2 Repulsors, and 3 Predators. Just give me a second. I'm going to bring up my little LVO stats sheet, and I'll get you that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. That's what we're. I don't think it really matters if I spoil it here. Nobody's going to be planning for it. We're bringing. We just bought. I just paid for 10 Repulsors, and we're doing that.
10
for 4,000 points
for a Decepticon.
Oh,
yeah.
Like that.
I thought so when I saw your display board with the big Ultramarine symbols on it. I'm like, oh. But
so while you pull up the stats, I'll talk about that a little bit. So I've been actually working on a 1 foot by 6 foot display board, and I took foam and I carved out and basically made like a giant Imperial Fortress wall. And Joe Duca actually cut me out some Ultramarine symbols for it. And I've been actually doing a lot of experimenting on this like display board to try and make it look pretty legit, but it's kind of interesting. And I don't know if Repulsors is like as a singles list is definitely better than a team list or a doubles list, just because you need Girly Man in the list. If you don't have them, it really hurts it.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I'm just super excited to play it because I think it's as you said, I think it can go all the way if getting a few lucky matchups. And it's also super helped by that new assassin rule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're just like, oh shit, you have a ton of smites, which kind of screw over my repulsors. I'm just gonna bring in a Calexis, or oh you don't, but you have orcs and you have characters that I need to kill, while my 30 scouts with sniper rifles rerolling hits and wounds plus a Vindicare should kill all your characters. Yeah. So I think it's legit right now.
Oh, I think you're right. It was funny pre-LVO. Pablo and I were kind of talking a lot about who we thought were going to perform well. I was using my stats, and he was just using his stuff. And he was like, "You got to watch Aaron Towler. He's going to do stuff." And I was like, "Who the fuck is Aaron Towler?" Pardon my language. I'm not. Am I allowed to swear on this?
I don't think it matters.
Okay, cool. I saw a mature audience thing, but anyway, yeah, Aaron Towler, and then I kind of heard of him, didn't know how good he was, and then I saw his list. I was like, well, if he doesn't go up against the Castellan, I think he's gold, and he didn't.
Even if he does, man.
Well, and that's the thing.
Cannons.
Then I talked to people that play with the guy, and he's like, he loves the Castellan list because he like threat overload essentially, and most Castellan players shoot out the Predators first, which is what he wants. He wants them to shoot the Predators so his repulsors stay alive.
Yeah, those repulsors, they're hard to kill, and they just shoot so many shots, rerolling hits and wounds, it doesn't matter. And don't underestimate that. I don't know if he had scout snipers in his list, but I don't believe he did. I kind of think even a few minimum 3 units of 5 of those could do a ton of mortal wounds.
The new snipers, pair those with G-Man, boom.
Oh, the ones that shoot through walls, yeah.
Yeah, and a D3 plus a mortal, oh yeah.
Okay, so quick for the question. For M. Popa, at LVO, there were 33 Space Marine lists. 26 of them were played as primary. Of those 26, 19 had Gullyman. And he had a win rate of, and it's going to match basically how Space Marines did as a whole. It was just over 47%. So
that's fair. I think that's a good number.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, if he's almost kind of mandatory if you're going to run pure Space Marines.
Yeah. There were 22 Ultramarine lists there, from what I remember off the top of my head. 2 of them brought just Calgar instead of Gullyman, and then there was one guy who brought. It was a very weird list that didn't perform very well. He didn't have Gullyman or Calgar. He just had like Tigurius and a bunch of scouts.
Yeah. Some people like to have fun.
Yep.
So back to the stats chart. We're talking about
win percent as primary or whole. So who's the highest?
So you go all the way over to the right. Ignore Corsairs because that's one person.
Okay.
And then you got Inari. So Inari at 58.66. They've been holding steady in this range for quite a while. Basically, since I've started collecting stats, they've been in about the 60% range.
Yeah.
And it's never dipped. They're just so good.
Yeah,
I'm not surprised. They're just so good. A lot of high-end players have been playing them for like almost since 7th edition. There's people that have been playing Inari competitively for. I want to say like 4 or 5 years, even though they've slightly changed. They haven't changed that much.
Yeah, and it's a strong finesse army. Like not everybody can win with them because you gotta play your stuff. You gotta play your stuff right. But at the same time, if you know what you're doing, it doesn't leave a lot of options for your opponent, and you tend to have 8 outs in any given situation. So.
And it does favor the ITC. The way that they score in the ITC, they reward mobility heavily, and they're the most mobile army. So that's just it's always been that way. ITC's always rewarded mobility.
Yep. Even when I collect ETC stats, Inari are at the top, just not by as far a margin. Generally, in ETC, Inari sit at about like a 56% win rate, whereas in ITC, they've been hovering at 60 for forever. Imperial Knights are next at 54.44. And the thing about Imperial Knights is this is a number that I think is a little overblown. A lot of their wins come in the first 3 rounds. They're not as adept at winning their final game. Let's put it that way. Uh-huh. There's only really been one major tournament win with a Knights primary list in quite a long time. And that was actually this last weekend.
Yeah.
Malik Amin Rubio brought 2 Castellans and a Gallant, I think it was, to a tournament and won it. So
yeah,
I get it. Knights are really good at taking out lower to low mid-tier armies, and then once you get somebody that knows how to deal with them, it's game over.
They're like a slightly above average gatekeeper, basically.
Yeah.
Like if you're a newbie, I hate to say it, if you're a newer player and you want to wreck face at your local club, you pick up a Knight army, I think, because you're going to win more of your games than you're going to lose as long as your club is average.
Yeah, and it's something I brought up a few times is I feel like Imperial Knights are probably a little too strong for that reason. It's not because they're winning tournaments. It's because they beat the crap out of newer players. It's one of those balance things where you can't just balance for competitive. You kind of have to balance all the way down. But I'm not sure what they do to tone down Knights without making them garbage overall. You know what I mean?
It's a fine line when you have 4 models, right? It's
exactly.
A very fine line. Or 3 models in the case of the guy that won the tournament.
Yeah.
So at the bottom, of course, discounting the dude with the Titan is, of course, the Grey Knights. To nobody's surprise.
At 32.29%. They've been at the bottom since I started collecting data. What has actually been interesting is post chapter approved. All of the power armor factions except Deathwatch have slowly dropped even further than where they were. Yeah. Which I think a lot of people expected they'd get a bump, and it just hasn't happened. Dark Angels in particular dropped a lot. They were actually performing, I wouldn't say well, they've always been below 50%, but they were in that 46, 47 where it was kind of like an acceptable range. And now even they're down to that 40, 41, 42% range. Space Marines, Space Wolves have always essentially been garbage. They're the only faction I've seen where they got a codex and got worse after their codex.
People don't play them though. That's the thing.
That's the big thing with Space Wolves is there's nobody competitive is playing them, and every list you look at, I shouldn't say that. Daniel Ye played a Falchion and went 5-1 at LVO with Space Wolves.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Does that really count as Space Wolves though?
Except, I was about to get to that. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Is that Space Wolves, or is it you brought a 700-point like Lord of War that got you some wins? I'm not sure. He had a couple Chaplain Dreadnought, some other cool stuff in his list. But yeah, Space Wolves, I think a lot of that is the players, but it's also because like the top players don't see anything there that'll win them games, right?
Yeah, and obviously
that's kind of the balance.
We got like Inquisition, Dark Mechanics is at 50%. That's just like 1 or 2 people. That's why the numbers are so round. So we just discount those. But the thing that really strikes me about this chart, other than the low and the high, is the fairly flat distribution across a majority of the armies these days.
Yeah,
like we're talking within a standard deviation of like 5%, which is probably GW. If they saw this, would probably be like, that's pretty good.
They did. Yeah, they have seen this stuff. They actually do check out the stats, I'm told.
Yeah.
Reese has been talking them up a lot. And what I'll say is, for me, a properly competitive list with the amount of data I have, between 47 and 53% is kind of the range you want to be in.
Yeah. So how many factions are within that range? Let's see, maybe
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, and it was actually better at LVO. LVO had even more lined up. They're starting to spread again post LVO as we get into smaller tournaments. Yeah. But yeah, and a lot of these, and even some of the factions that are lower, like Necrons at a 46%, that's like a 6% jump over where they'd been pre LVO. Like not even pre chapter approved. Like after chapter approved, they were at like a 40% win rate. But now there's been a couple lists that have come out that people are realizing can win games, and they've top tabled 2 tournaments in the last week. And like there's builds for almost everybody now.
So I have to ask, what Necron list are you talking about?
The Necron list. Thomas Christensen went 5-1 at LVO. He also almost won a tournament last week in Sweden, the Westeros 6, I believe. It's like 80 people. It's really based around 3 Doomsday Arcs, 3 Doomskythes, and then usually, depending on the player, it's Tomb Blades and Immortals, so they go like a Tesla spam, or they'll take like 2 big blocks of Warriors with Immortals.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it's mainly the Doomsites and the Doomsday Arcs doing all the work, because the Doomsday Arcs are essentially immune to the Castellan.
Yep. So
it's a really good matchup for them. And the Doomsides with that stratagem where they can pump out a ton of mortal wounds, and they surprise people is the big thing. They move up and they'll pop out like 12 mortal wounds on a unit, and you're just like, oh, that's not what was supposed to happen here.
It's pretty nasty. I gotta say. Yeah. Mm-hmm. M Pope has a question. Will do you? I know the answer to this, but do you do a soft reset like after chapter approved or after Vigilus, like significant releases? But you probably mark those as when those happened, right?
Vigilus wasn't significant. Come on.
So I do mark them in my database. I'm going to be adding a filter soon to it so that people can actually just like click on the filter and it'll say like here's post chapter approved, post whatever. But for me, I already do that. And I did a hard reset at LVO, just to so I kind of archived all the 2018 data, and 2019 data is now LVO forward. So.
All right.
Makes sense. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Next chart. Let's go on. I'm curious.
Let's go on for this next chart. What should we talk about next year, Peter?
So Grey Knights at the bottom is no shock at all to me.
No.
Yeah.
Inari at the top is not, but the rest of them seem pretty balanced. And I also would, I don't know, I would almost like to see. I know you can't do this. I'm just kind of spitballing when we get the next chart up, but it'd be nice if maybe people could check out. Let's say you sign up at BCP. There's 800 people. It'd be nice if people would like check a box. I came to win, or I came to goof, and then you could remove the goofs from the stats. I think we'd get a better picture, right?
Yeah. So one thing I did for the LVO stats, and people really got into it, was for LVO, I took the top 150 ITC players out of the data and created a separate database just for them to see how they would perform. And it was very significant. Like the top 150 had an average win rate of 71% almost, compared to the rest of the field. And against people that weren't in the top 150, they had almost an 80% win rate. So it just showed like the differential between the skill differential. So like it's not the army that makes the difference so much as it is the player.
Yeah.
I mean the player is picking that army, but you know what? And the other thing was essentially every faction except Grey Knights had somebody from the top 150 that was playing it.
Yeah.
At LVO.
Yeah.
And that was another big sign. For
every faction had somebody who went 5-1 except for Grey Knights, right?
And Blood Angels. Blood Angels had they had a couple people playing them as a secondary, but as a primary.
Well, and Sisters didn't either, right? Or did they?
The Sisters did. Sisters had somebody go 5-1.
Eric took Custodes 5-1, so yeah.
Yeah, I think there were 3 players that went 5-1 with Custodes. So.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought there was nobody with primary Sisters though.
Yeah, there was a primary Sisters player that went 5-1.
Was it Gagno?
No, Gagno was primary Deathwatch.
That's right, he was Deathwatch, but he used a lot of Sisters and
he did have a big
Archangels.
Sisters battalion. I wish I could remember the guy. Well, you know what? Saying I wish I could remember when I have the friggin' database in front of me.
We don't get bogged down if you don't want to look it up, but.
All right, so this next chart is a T-whip comparison. So Peter, if you could just clarify, in my mind at least, what exactly the T-whip is.
Yeah, so T-whip, all credit to Val Heffelfinger for this.
Don't credit that guy with anything. Come on.
He was the one that asked if I could create a stat that did this, and I just so happened that I could. So what this is it's tournaments and winning position. So this is how many times, like a percent, of times your faction has gone at least 4-0 in a tournament before they got their first loss.
4-0 is the mark. Okay.
Yeah, because it's kind of this common anecdote that almost anybody could go 3-0 with the right amount of luck and draws, right? But 4-0,
4-0, you could go. Well, if you're talking about the first 4 games,
yeah,
is that what you mean? Okay, I was just thinking like because a lot of people will like place really high at events and they'll be like, oh look, I'm in the top third. But they lost their first or second game, like both of them, and then they win their next 4 like huge.
Exactly.
And it skews all the results, right?
So this is you had to win your first 4 before you took a loss.
Okay, great.
And so I calculate that. I also have like average round losses for factions, but this is something that has proven so far over the last year to really kind of show where factions are from a like a win perspective, like a competitive perspective. So if you look like Adeptus Sororitas, they make up the blue bars are their faction representation as a primary faction, and the gray is their T-whip percentage. So that's the percent of lists that have at least gotten to 4-0 that are that faction. And what you really want to see from a balance at least perspective is these lines to match up relatively closely. I think if you have that, your army is at least competitive, and if they're above, then obviously there might be something we need to look at. So if that gray bar is much higher than your blue bar, like with Inari, as you can see, it's double. That's a faction that is overperforming. So if you look, Inari make up 5.68% of all lists as a primary. Over 11% of lists that have made, which because the tournaments I generally cover are 5 rounds, made essentially the top table or the top 2 tables, is at 11.5.
So the ones that need looking at by yours is Astra Militarum, Imperial Knights, and Unari, as well as Cult Mechanicus are the only ones that are gray higher than blue, correct?
Yeah, and some of that, if what you want to do is say like Imperial Knights is 11.5, 10.3 as a primary. It's pretty close, right? Representation to TWIP. Yeah. If I didn't give you guys this data, but if you look at the 2018 data, Inari were really bad, and Drukhari had a significant differential as well. Those were the two. Drukhari had like a 5% of the meta, and were 9% of either winning factions or factions that at least made 4-0.
Yeah, I don't actually know what happened to signify the death of Drukhari, but Drukhari went from being like disgusting to kind of just another book, right? Over the last 6 months.
Yeah, I would say in probably the last month or two, we saw a bit of a dip in Drukhari.
Yeah.
Just looking at the trends, a lot of it was, and they were still winning tournaments, by the way. It's just like it would be like they win, but they'd also have 8 guys in the bottom. Kind of like you saw it with Orcs for a long time. And there was a big pickup in Drukhari play in January. They almost doubled the percent, like their faction percentage. But LVO, they performed well. They were over a 50% win rate. They had a guy get to that top, that extra bonus round was a primary Drukhari. So like it wasn't like they performed poorly, but you saw a bit of a dip, and now they're coming back. This last week's data, like that 7.69%, most of that happened in the last week. There was a couple Drukhari wins and a couple other like 5-1s that they had where they won their first 4.
So message to Riven, you better get on that, Scary. You got to get that percentage up there.
Well, I think if you're going to play Space Elves and you want to win, you got to go Unari.
Yeah,
sadly,
I mean that's obvious, and these stats just kind of bore that out, right? Like,
yeah, they're kind of the top end.
They should not exist anyway. Unari should never have been made.
So, but you can see most factions are pretty even when it comes to like their performance versus like how they top 4. It's usually just power armor right now. Grey Knights, Dark Angels have nobody. Blood Angels have nobody. And Custodes have not been the best. They have taken quite if you want to talk about an army that took quite the downturn so far of late, it was Custodes.
Biased opinions here, guys. Biased opinions.
Oh yeah. No, it's trust me.
We need fixing GW. Come on.
Yeah, the biased opinion for me is still thinking they're amazing. Even though I check the numbers all the time.
So I think from the numbers, from what I've kind of understood from you saying, and from the numbers I kind of quickly looked on when you sent me the graphs, I believe the problem with Dark Angels, because I believe Dark Angels is a very strong book. I just think that the Ultramarines kind of killed the Dark Angels, just because Girly Man adds that extra push to the list. As a Dark Angel player, you just notice that the re-rolling all wounds instead of the ones is like a massive improvement no matter what list you take.
Yeah.
So part of me feels like Dark Angels are they appear to be weaker statistically than they actually are, just because there's another book that you can essentially count as your models for and win with.
Yeah, a lot of the power armor problems come with that. If you look at Space Marines, because I also collect like what sub factions everybody takes and the percentages, and Ultramarines make up like 80% or 90% of all power armor essentially, because of Gullyman. And I think you're 100% right. There was a period, like I said, pre-December, where Dark Angels were performing relatively well. And that kind of died off. Now you see Kyle Thompson has been doing decently with them, Aaron Wish. But Kyle's list is essentially just Samael and 3 Talon Masters, right? Like that's all he's taking from the the
and that's like
the Dark
1,000
Angels,
points.
and that's 1,000 points. It does well, but it's 4 models.
Yeah.
And then Aaron's a really good player and he loves his plasma inceptors. So
well, he must take a lot of infantry then to kind of get in front of you to keep those guys alive, right?
What, Aaron? Yeah,
the Talon Master guy.
Oh, the Talon Master fellow. Yeah, it's like an Astra Militarum brigade.
Oh, makes sense.
With Samael, 2 or 3 Talon Masters depending on the list, and then a knight of some kind is usually like his last 400 points, like a Crusader.
Yeah, that's great, because a lot of the problems with the Astra Militarum brigades is that you can't hide a lot of your damage units in the back. Yeah. So that kind of solves that issue. Now you can't shoot my assault cannons, heavy, whatever you arm them with, probably missile launchers too, or you can't put them on them, can you?
No, they just have like twin assault cannons, but it's
and a twin heavy bolter, right? Is that the one?
Yeah,
I'm thinking of.
Yeah. So you got like 18
shots.
It's 18 shots coming from 4 guys, re-rolling all hits and re-rolling ones to wound. It's not terrible, and they ignore cover.
And they can't be picked out unless you're a sniper.
Exactly.
Because they're 8 wounds or 9, something like that. 8. Right?
I believe they're 8 wounds, and they all have. And they're all like, you can give, I think, 3 of them the like +2 strength power swords as well, so they're not shitty in combat either.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like that a lot. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Okay, so we'll just talk for a few minutes, since we're 2 out of 3 Custodes players here, about this chart, Adeptus Custodes. So this is our win rate against others, or others' win rate against us?
That's our win rate against other factions.
Okay.
Isn't that the same though? Either way, I'm just kidding.
I don't know.
The bars would be bigger the other way.
All right, so we totally kick butt on Harlequins and Inquisition and Blood Angels.
Oh, good for you!
And Thousand Sons.
Beat all the chumps.
Actually, Thousand Sons as well, and Renegade
which is new. We didn't perform super well against Thousand Sons for a while.
Nemesis normally.
Same with Tau. Tau we generally performed poorly, but that has switched up.
Yeah.
And Ari
Sons aren't what they used to be, right? They used to be like a primary Thousand Sons is not a high end list, right? It's usually a sub faction with Chaos Space Marines, and with the nerf to the Chaos Space Marines, Thousand Sons have kind of just
So for the longest time, Thousand Sons were almost at an Ari level for win rate. But what's happened, and it started with LVO really, because LVO was the first I saw this. People just kind of completely, well, I shouldn't say they completely moved away. They kept the Ahriman and 2 Demon Princes, but then dropped all the Zangors and switched to Chaos Demons. So pretty much everybody's primary Chaos Demons now, like 1,200 points of it, and then they'll take Ahriman, 2 Demon Princes for their smites.
It's funny,
and that's
Zangors
kind of the go-to.
Zangors
that was
just dropped
ETC.
off the face of the earth, didn't they?
Well, they went up in points. They went up in points cost, and even though they're still really good, if you're looking at it from a sheer competitive point of view, like, don't get me wrong, Zangor are still functional. They're still an effective unit, but Plague Bearers are better.
Yeah, and that's what you're seeing now. There have been a couple wins for Thousand Sons in the last couple weeks, or at least like really good performances. There was a guy, Ryan Mandrick, who brought Scarab Occult Terminators to a GT and dominated that. Beta Bolter rules really help them, because now you're putting out a squad of 10. It's like 350 points, but you're putting out 40 strength 4 AP -2 shots, which isn't bad, and they're tough.
You can reroll hits with Armon too, so.
Yeah, and you ignore AP -1. Or no, you take 1 less damage from AP -1 below. Anyway,
we'll
sorry,
see.
Reroll 1s to hit, right? It's reroll 1s to hit, right?
Reroll 1s to hit with Ahriman. Yeah, I think it's
sorry, I'm
reroll
having
everything
baby
if you take
brain.
Magnus, but it's
you're not good.
We'll see what happens Tuesday. I'm playing Nick, and he's got the old rubrics, so
nice.
We'll see how that goes.
Well, they don't get to use the Beta Bolter then, right? Because he's going to drop them in. Like if they move because they're just infantry, they don't get to use the Beta, right?
Yeah, if they're infantry, they don't get Beta. It's
That's
only
why the
Terminators
so
and Pikes. Yeah.
Because you can put this 300-point unit in reserve, drop them in, and just literally delete something. And that -2 AP, even though it's only strength 4, is pretty huge.
Yep.
And you can kind of buff them a little bit with spells and things, and they're not terrible. So
yeah. Okay. I got some questions for you, Peter. And you can just tell me if these are stupid questions because of my lack of statistical knowledge. But,
no, that's fine.
So, and some of these we've answered already in our talk. And if anybody on the stream or watching wants to ask any questions at this point, just type them in the Twitch chat there. So obviously we've already talked a little bit about trying to account for player skill, and it would be cool if we had like some player stats and how they interact with different armies and their win. And eventually, let's say 10 years from now, we might have enough data where we'll be like Nick versus Steve Pempreen. Nick won, 66% of the time or whatever.
Yeah, I'm hoping that'll be much sooner than that. If BCP can get, and it's not BCP, sorry. BCP's already got their shit together in terms of stats. Like they can pull all sorts of stats. We just need the community to come together on some kind of list builder that everyone will use and use properly. Yeah. And once we get that, then we can automate a lot of statistics and get that kind of data.
Yeah, like it would be cool if we could like, and I don't know if you think this would ever happen, but we could be like, okay, here's the 80 people going to this event next weekend. Here's all their numbers. What's the percentage of each person going to win? Like you could almost
Well, there's been a lot of murmurings for some time now about creating like an ELO for Warhammer players, and I think we're almost on the verge where we can do that. But it's going to take like GW or somebody coming out with a list builder that everyone will use, that'll format everything in exactly the right way. Because otherwise, it's like I already put enough man hours in doing this. Getting like exact player data, like especially for like I see M Papa was asking about RTTs. Like that's what we would need is a way to collect all that RTT data as well for these big players.
You can't go and do that manually like this.
No.
Crazy. Yeah.
Or we create a tournament circuit, but then we need money. Like we need somebody that's going to put a bunch of money into a tournament circuit so that the players will be paid to go to all these places and play.
Well, I can see you just started a Patreon.
Yeah. Hey.
So I got two more questions for you, and then we'll go to the chat. Number one is, do you think, obviously, the good players minimize the effect of luck, but luck has a role in this game. Is there any way of figuring out, like, a coefficient of luck per army? So each army probably has a different degree by which luck will affect them. So it would be cool if we could figure out, like, okay, orcs have a 1.7% coefficient of luck or something, or that would be kind of academic at best, probably.
I don't know. The best thing I think you can look at is that in general,
if you have enough games,
more dice rolled gives you a more average, progresses to the mean, as you said, and averages it out. When I say like you need luck to win a tournament, I'm not talking dice luck. I'm talking matchup luck. Because really, like dice, I hate people that complain about dice, and I really do my best to never even think about dice and not even complain or look at them, because it is what it is. And you have to, as you said, plan for the worst case scenario. You can never, you can take the chance and if you get a couple of rolls, you might have won that game, but there's also probably a dozen games where if you wouldn't have got the rolls you got, you would have lost. So it evens out in the long run. And when you're looking at like thousands of games and a whole year of tournaments, you can't expect the same person to win everything, but they're going to do consistently well at all of them, right?
Yeah. And I think that's where it comes down to. I don't know if you could do a luck coefficient based on faction, just because lists are so varied. Like orcs, Nick Nonavati did quite a little speech about that, about this the concept of you roll more dice to get closer to the mean, and that's one of the reasons why he thinks orcs are very competitive, because they roll so many dice. But that being said, you could run 20 mega knobs in a list and cut out all your boys, and now you're not rolling as many dice, right? So then that luck
arguably
changes.
Arguably depends what they're armed with.
Exactly.
And that 20-man mega knob unit coming in is actually really good.
Yes, I got to see
Will and I have been talking about it for a long time, and we just never. I think Will actually has most of the models, but it's a fantastic army.
Yeah, it's started to do well. I've seen 2 or 3 lists that have performed. At CanCon, there was one that went like 7-1, that was 20 mega knobs, and then we had this one list that went 5-0-1. But yeah, like I'm not big on the luck coefficient for all those reasons, and I'm the guy that will talk about dice throughout a game. But I warn my opponents in advance. Like the stats guy is always going to talk about probability, so I don't complain per se, but you'll hear me like muttering percentages at times. It's my little weird thing. I'll sit there and be like, "That's not what should have happened. I should have had 2 more of those." And then
I've just played so many people where they say, "Oh, that's terrible," and I go, "Actually, you're above averages there." Oh, what do you mean? I should be doing at least 1 wound on that. I was like, "No, you shouldn't be shooting that at all." Like,
Yeah,
Like it's
and
so unlikely, dude.
Yeah.
That's also something I do. A lot of the guys back home. There's a fellow in particular. He's one of my best friends, but he's always going on about how terrible his dice are, and it's kind of become a meme back there. But whenever I play him, he's like, "Oh, the dice failed me again." I'm like, "Actually, you were only supposed to have 2 hits, and you got 3. So like, don't think too far into it there."
Okay, my final question before we go to the chat is, how, and I really don't know, how do you account for soup? Obviously, some factions can't soup, but I know that we can say that Astra Militarum was, primary or a significant part of such and such lists, but how can we really account for a lot of the souping these days?
So we can. It takes a lot more work. What I have been doing is for explicit lists that I can trend to be performing well. I have started collecting data on them. So an example, if we go way back to when that Mitch Pelham Castellan list was everywhere, I collected extensive data on that, how it was performing, and compared it to how it performed without, how a knight list performed without guard, or this X faction performed as pure versus with cult mechanicus. And I did a lot of it with LVO too, just to see how certain units would perform with and without other units combined. I think you can go a lot deeper with it, but we need that stuff I was talking about earlier. We need BCP and list builders to get to a point where it's mostly automated, and then someone like me can sit with an Excel spreadsheet and just kind of run a couple filters and figure it all out versus manually calculating everything, counting points. Because like I said, with BAO, I was counting detachment points and things, and I had to stop because, some people write their lists on a napkin.
Yeah.
And I can't read your shitty handwriting. So
really you need a way that when people enter their lists, that gets computerized, so then you can just pull out from there how many company commanders you had that without having to do that manually.
It's hard enough to get people to enter their lists, let alone in a correct format.
But,
exactly.
Which you're about to find out, helping with the CanHammer team.
That's what we need to do, right?
Impossible.
Yeah.
That's where the ETC. I think the ETC is the organization, is the closest thing to having a consistent list program in place. And even that, the lists have minor inconsistencies, which we ignore because it doesn't affect anything. But nothing's perfect.
Well, the LVO did a decent job this year of
they did, but it was like herding cats because I got to see it, right? The guys at BCP sent me an early list review so that I could start my stats data about 2 weeks in advance, and you could see the errors, right? Because then they were sending out emails, hey, you need to correct this. So the first go of the 700 lists, I believe, I want to say something like 400 had some kind of major error that you couldn't ignore, and it just got slowly better. By the end of it, I think there were only 50 or 60 lists with issues, which really, when you consider it's your first go, was pretty significant. But it really took a long time, a lot of pushing players.
Yeah, wargamers are like cats, man. You can't hurt them.
Okay, we got questions here on the Twitch. So Knight of the Dark asks, is there any statistical analysis for if flyers really are overpowered? That's a relative term, I guess. Or is there unit by unit analysis, not just factions, which I know we have for Castellan, for example.
Yeah, so I've done a lot of unit by unit analysis for things like the Castellan, Dark Reapers, Shining Spears in the past. For LVO, I went the extra mile and did it for every unit. So I counted every unit in every list, tagged them to players. So I have all of that. I'm going to be doing an article for Frontline Gaming here soon with a lot of that, but I can go over a little bit of it. For flyers, like he specifically pointed out, I looked at Eldar flyers pretty deeply. So to give an example, at LVO, there were 10 players that brought 4 or more Eldari flyers. They had a combined score of 40, 19, and 1. Lists that brought a Crimson Hunter Exarch or generally they brought 3, had a 58% win rate. The Void Raven Bomber was the worst. It only had a 42. Excuse me, I got a cough here.
Oh, he's taking care of himself for a second there. I'm not surprised at all that the Eldar flyers are hot. They're generally fantastic.
They're so good.
And And the Crimson Hunters are really good right now just because there's the Exarchs, just because there's so many. Like, you see a lot of the Star Cannons and Pulse Lasers. They do really well against Knights. They do really well against big stuff. And then they can, do some damage. Yeah. You back, Peter?
And
I'm back.
They're like Psychers. They don't have to worry about flying off the board.
No, they're not. No. Crimson Hunters are not Psychers.
One of them is
Psyker.
I can't remember.
They just put out a bunch of... Yeah, the Hemlock is the Psyker.
The Hemlock is... And in some ways, I prefer the Hemlock because of what it does. But the tournament results that you see, you generally don't see the Hemlocks. We ran them at CanHammer Sudbury team because I prefer them just because of the Psychic. But you see the Crimson Hunters way more.
Yeah. Yeah, there were a ton at LVO, and so those 10 players that went balls deep on Flyers did very well. They had well over a 60% win rate. It's a very strong list, and it actually surprised people in the North American side, I believe. In the UK, you see it everywhere, like these up to 9 Flyer lists, but a lot of it has to do with practice and getting used to move blocking people.
I've seen Valkyries now, 7 to 9 Valkyries.
Yeah, that's pretty ridiculous. This Tempestus Scion Vigilist detachment. It's not really winning anything, but it's a list you see. So
yeah.
But yeah. I think it should be stated why when you talk about, I think the question was around are Flyers broken. When you talk about are Flyers broken, I think specifically you can refer to the Eldar Flyers just because they can move twice, which makes it almost impossible to kind of destroy them or block them. It allows them to move and go side to side across the front of somebody's board and block them in. If you got rid of that, it's the Vector Dancer rule. If you got rid of that rule, I don't think the Eldar Flyers would be usable in 9. Maybe the Valkyries are, but I'd be surprised to see 9 Valkyrie is probably good for a different reason, but I wouldn't want to go and take 9 Space Marine Flyers just because you're going to get blocked if you lose them all in a turn, right?
You are, and it's explicitly because yes, like you said, they Vector Dance and the potential -2 to hit, right? -3 even with Ally Talk, yeah, because you can also use the stratagem if you really need to keep one alive.
Yeah. They got everything going for them, those Flyers.
They basically just have too much rules, too much good stuff. And that's the danger with the Eldar, right? They were always meant to be a fragile scalpel. And so they need a ton of kick-ass rules, but they overdid it a little bit.
And one of them's got a Feel No Pain as well, and it just adds up pretty much. Okay, next question. M. Popa says that GW needs to do what I think that's Wizards of the Coast does with Magic.
Yeah.
He comments that CPs and free rerolls make luck very minimal. And where was that other question?
Well, what do they need to do Wizards of the Coast? What does Wizards of the Coast do?
Yeah,
I didn't get that.
Yeah, he was probably referring to something we were talking about earlier.
I think collecting data in a tournament circuit sort of thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
It must
I thought he was referring to things in Wizards of the sets expire, so books expire, but that would be terrible.
Yeah, that'd be awful.
No index anymore? What are you saying?
Well, actually, that's something that needs to happen, in my opinion, but I'm not going to get on that. I'll save that rant for the next cast.
Yeah, I'll agree with you, and then I'm going to probably get about 6 emails tomorrow about why I'm wrong, about why index needs to stay. But yeah,
no, it doesn't need to stay. It's stupid. It's they're out of date. Get rid of them.
Apparently, Wizards of the Coast print out sheets and input the data. So I don't know. I mean, if GW actually came out with an official tournament list builder app and it spit out a format that was readable or inputable into BCP or their own app or whatever, that would fix it.
Hey, look at AOS. If as we said 1,000 times, if 40K had the app that AOS had, nobody would have drives with pirated PDFs on it. Nobody would have all these other apps would go out of business because you would be able to go on and read all the rules and you could buy formations for $1 per formation, so you don't really care. And the only reason you buy your books is for items and things. I think if they went to that style, every AOS event I go to, I'd say majority of the lists, I don't go to many obviously recently, but majority of the lists are printed off GW apps.
Yeah.
Nobody bothers with anything else these days.
Yeah. It's exportable, and the other system that they have that's web-based they got that. So
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like they already do it, and it's like just do it.
just
it's
for
great.
some reason, like they don't do it for 40K. I'm not sure why that is, or maybe it's going to drop on us one day. It's going to be amazing. I don't know, but
it's supposed to. Apparently at LVO they were asked about it because they had said like a year ago now that they were creating one, and then they kind of came out with that one that used power level, and everyone thought it was garbage immediately. And they came out and said at LVO it's just because it's so complicated they're having a harder time, but that they're still working on one.
Yeah,
well, anybody that's programmed understands that. Like the 40K, like even look at the way that Battlescribe does it. Yeah. It's a nightmare doing formations and multiples of. It's kind of a pain in the butt, and I totally get that. Is that the way they designed the 40K list building system? They made it overly complex when they could have made it a lot simpler.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, and it's interesting that they're looking at your stats because they must feel like this is kind of information that they find very interesting, and so hopefully they're putting that into their own app if and when it ever comes.
Stats aren't cruel and stats don't lie, right?
Yeah, and that's really like the whole reason why I started this was we're a very anecdotal group as 40K players. We love to talk about how things are garbage based on our own opinions, and I just wanted like firm numbers to either back that up or deny it, right?
Yeah. Yep. Cool. There are no more questions in the chat. I just wanted to take Chris, did you have any other things?
No, I'm just like, if you're doing, I would like to see a model count, like just a pure, not wounds, but a model count stat. I know that you have your hands full, so don't worry about it, but I thought that would be interesting to see. Do armies have with more models win more? Mm-hmm. Because I believe, and this could be, I know that a lot of people, I tend to be biased in that I like lots of models. I like I guess you said Nick said this. I don't know. I never heard him say it, so I'm not quoting him. But when you have more shots, more dice, more models like cultists, like orcs. Well, not cultists now, they're too expensive. But when you have those big hordes like 100 plague bearers, it doesn't matter if you fail a bunch of saves because you're making so many that a lot of them will balance out in the long run. And so I also believe that high model count's always better. And I'd be curious if a lot of the winning armies, maybe except for Yunari, they might break that. But mind you, you're seeing a lot of Guardians now. So I don't know. I'd like to know. But.
Yep. That has definitely been something I've been asked, and it often, my answer just comes down to time. Like, I spend a lot of time collecting the data, and so the model counts, like for LVO, I probably spent, I didn't math it out, but it was probably about 42 hours I spent on collecting LVO data.
It's crazy.
Between lists and units. I mean, it was fun for the first 25, and in the last 17, I was like, what's happening here? But, no, it's So and that's where we come back to. If we can get something that automates that part, like I'll still do it for major events. That's kind of been my current shtick is if you have something that's like 170 people or more ish, and that's just like a random number. I'll probably collect all of that and spit it out for people. I'm going to try to do it for Adepticon. We'll have to see if Adepticon uses BCP or if they just like write it on a chalkboard or what. But yeah.
Yeah. Val is wondering why you're not showing your face.
Listen, Val, I saw what happened when you showed your face on this podcast. I don't want the same apocalypse to happen. It broke the internet.
What happened to him? He broke all the cameras and screens on the internet?
No, remember our whole podcast crashed.
Oh, yes. Well, it didn't crash. We had a great time. We kept going. We just didn't live stream. But we figured all that out. That was Darren's old crappy laptop.
Yeah, now we can host a bajillion people. Well, I, Peter, want to commend you on your efforts and work gathering all these statistics. And like I said to LLV, I mean, somebody like yourself got to do it, and it's amazing. And it's like a service to community. You should get one of those GW whatever things where you get your name put on Warhammer World board. What are those? The
little community awards or whatever for being a cool cat.
Well, just put a falcon face on there or something.
Oh, Man, no, now I want one. That'd be so awesome.
So
Yeah, if
everybody
anybody gets a falcon tattoo on their butt, please send Peter all the pictures.
Yes, please. That's exactly what I want.
You can even send them to canhammer.podcast@gmail.com and we will forward them to.
boom, boom.
So I think that's good for the show. I hope I think it was very interesting. It's getting a bit late though. So any final thoughts, you guys?
Yeah, I wanted to just update people on tournaments. CanHammer team is closing entry soon for team entries. If you're still planning on coming, do get your teams in and do it pretty soon.
We're at 100 players?
Yeah, we're at 100 right now, and we have lots of space, but we kind of need teams in multiples of 2. So we're probably not going to just take one team, but we'll take another 2 teams, if you see what I mean. So it's hard to get like a ringer team. Of
5 people? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like impossible. So do get on that if you still want to come to CanHammer Team Tournament. Day of Blood, April 6th. That's our AOS RTT down in Brockville. We are at 14, I believe. We got lots of space, and do sign up for that if you want to come play some AOS. And we are using Realm Rules and Realm Spells. So I thought we'd join the modern AOS and start doing all that stuff. So
we did before, man. That's not new.
Full Realm Rules and Realm Spells?
No, we always use like the items and spells.
Yeah, not the items. We're using the actual realm rules and spells. And then we've got other tournaments to plug. I can't remember off my top of my head. I know Kevin and Irvin doing Basement Open up in June. John Green and the War Masters, I think I sold out, but that's also in June. TGX is in July. I'm hoping to go to that one. And we've got ETC is in July. Obviously, that's not August. You can't really apply to that, but you should support Team Canada.
Yeah, we are. We have 6 out of 8 fully selected players right now. We're waiting till the end of March to select the last 2, and the reason we're waiting till the end of March is that we are waiting for the new Chaos stuff, the March FAQ, and Vigilus 2 to see, because we're trying to pick based on faction as well as player ability to maybe make Team Canada podium this year.
Yeah, so Vigilus 2 is probably coming out next week, so that will be in CanHammer Team, because the list deadline is not till mid-April, and and we have basically Team Canada's bringing 2 teams to CanHammer Team as I don't know, like their final trials, I guess. So come to play if you're coming to CanHammer Team, because those 2 teams are there to in it to win it. And then finally, preliminary announcements, of course, going out for Capital City Bloodbath. It's our big event in August 16th to the 18th in Ottawa at the same awesome venue that we always have. And tickets will go on sale probably right after CanHammer Team Tournament. But you still have the opportunity to let us know if there's particular events you would like us to do on the Friday. We're trying to work out if and what we play on the Friday. But the big 40K and AOS will be on the Saturday, Sunday as usual, and it's going to be big this year. So,
yeah, extra big because I won't be there.
Extra big, yep.
It's like the weekend in between a wedding that I have to go to and the ETC. It's not happening.
Oh man, I'm going to be there. I'll be at Bloodbath for sure.
Awesome.
I've already booked the time off because Val Heffelfinger told me I had to. So
that Heffelfinger.
Yeah, what a guy. Can I plug something?
Yes, you
Not
can.
my website?
Yeah, of course.
For sure.
April 13th and 14th, I believe that's the weekend. Mork's Maritime Open. It's the first maritime GT event ever. Actually, probably the first fully ITC realized event that they're going to be having in the Maritimes.
Sweet.
So far, they've got 20 people already signed up, and they're looking to top out about 40. They've got quite the venue from what I've seen. I'm going to try to make that myself to help TO the event, but otherwise, they've got quite the great crew, and they're putting a lot of effort into it. So, yeah, if you're in the Maritimes mid-April, give it a go. Go see them.
Is it in Moncton?
It's in Moncton, yeah. The Mork's Maritime Open.
Mork's Maritime Open in Moncton, New Brunswick.
Yeah. Moncton, New Brunswick,
For our American listeners, that is on the East Coast.
Yeah.
I might have to... I'm actually supposed to go to a Moncton, book a work trip there. Maybe that could be a good weekend.
Hey, yeah. It's easy ITC points. These guys don't know what they're doing, and I hope they listen. I know
Jason,
one of them.
I'll bring Deathwing Terminators and just like skew the meta.
Jason
It'll be
Sparks
so
there.
awesome. Near Boston. Yeah, I drove to Boston from Moncton once. It's not as near as you think.
No, it's like still 6 hours, isn't it? 7 hours?
Yeah, it was like a 9-hour drive.
It's that far. I'm closer to Boston, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess if that's it for all the plugs, thanks guys for listening. Thanks Peter for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks Darren for being Darren, and we'll see you guys next week.
Good evening.
Bye-bye.